That's the consent agenda. Do either of those two resolutions need to come off? I don't see any hands, so I'll take a motion to move the consent agenda. So moved and properly seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. Now we have a consent agenda for bills on second reading. I will read the numbers of the bills and let me know if you want anything pulled off for discussion. Item number 3, BL 2022-1530. Item number 4, BL 2022-1532. Item number 5, BL 2022-1533. Item number 7, BL 2022-1536. Item number 8, BL 2022-1537. Item number 9, BL 2022-1538. Item number 10, BL 2022-1539. Item number 11, BL 2022-1540. Item number 12, BL 2022-1541. Item number 13, BL 2022-1542. That is the consent agenda. Council Member Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Can we pull number 3 and number 4 from consent, please?
Yes, ma'am, we sure can. So they are off consent. Any others? I will now read through the captions of the consent agenda. Item number 5, BL 2022-1533, Rosenberg sponsors, approves an easement on certain properties located at 7034 Charlotte Pike, owned by Lowe's Home Centers, LLC. BL 2022-1535, Roten sponsors, authorizes the Director of Public Property to transfer to the state of Tennessee any remaining fee interest the Metropolitan government may have in a portion of the right-of-way of Broadway Avenue in front of Union Station. BL 2022-1536, Withers and other sponsors, authorizes a Metropolitan government to remove existing sanitary sewer main, to abandon existing sanitary sewer manholes and easements, and to accept new sanitary sewer main and water mains, sanitary sewer manholes and easements for 5 properties located on Lebanon Pike. BL 2022-1537, Bradford and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to abandon existing sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manholes and easements, and to accept new sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manholes and easements for properties located at 1007 Thompson Place. BL 2022-1538, Parker and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept new sanitary sewer manhole for property located at Pinnock Avenue, unnumbered. BL 2022-1539, Withers and other sponsors, authorize the Metropolitan government to abandon existing water and sewer mains, sanitary sewer manhole and easements, to replace an existing sanitary sewer manhole, and to accept new water and sanitary sewer mains, fire hydrant assembly, sanitary sewer manholes and easements for 2 properties located at 601 Crutcher Street and 730 Lenore Street. BL 2022-1540, Withers and other sponsors, authorize the Metropolitan government to accept new public fire hydrant assembly for property located at 200 Broadway. BL 2022-1541, Lee and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to accept new sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manholes, fire hydrant assembly and easements for property located at 4119 Murfreesboro Pike, also known as Freedom Storage. And the last item on the consent agenda will be BL 2022-1542, Withers and other sponsors, authorizes the Metropolitan government to abandon existing public water main and to accept new public water main and fire hydrant assembly for property located at 1217 Phillips Street, also known as the Clark UMC Residential. Any of those items need to be pulled? Council Member Bradford.
Thank you, Chair. Just for, I guess, point of clarification, 1533, item 5, that was by the request of the sponsor deferred in planning. I don't know whether or not we want to match in here or if we just want to pass it.
Yeah, let's pull that off and we'll see what we can do about that. We've got a couple sponsors here. Thank you for that. Any others need to be pulled? Okay, so we are removing item number 5, and all the rest of the captions that we just read are on the consent agenda. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved. Properly seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. Now we'll go to item number 3 on the agenda, BL 2022-1530, cash and other sponsors, amends the Metropolitan Code to restrict obstructions within the public right way or public right-of-way. Looks like Councilmember Bradford is a sponsor, so we do have a sponsor here. So would someone like to move the bill?
So moved.
Moved and properly seconded. Discussion on the bill. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilman Bradford, Cash, Mendez, Benedict, for bringing this bill. Several things in the bill I see and I really like a lot. I'm hoping, though, to just kind of understand some of the context, some of the changes, which were maybe not as strong as I had hoped, and so I didn't know if a sponsor might just kind of share a brief history, kind of reasoning on it, some context, and or if Director Alarcon might want to do the same. I'll just defer to the sponsors on their preference, Chair.
Okay, Councilmember Bradford, do you have a comment, or you'd rather defer that to Director Alarcon? Director Alarcon, could you respond to that?
I'm sorry. Which item are we on? I apologize. I've been bombarded, so I've been making notes. So I apologize. I got a bit distracted. Help me out, please, sir.
Item number 3, 2022-1530, amends the Metropolitan Code to restrict obstructions within the public way or public right-of-way.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Councilmember Henderson, what was your question again?
I would just like to understand, I know these are, conversations we've had for a while, an area that this council has kind of looked into previously, Chair. Councilmember Parker, I think at the start of this term, chaired a special committee about right-of-way and some of the concerns that we were seeing there. That was a committee on which I served. So I appreciate there's some good things in this bill, and some other things I don't see, or some things that I hope would be stronger. And so I guess I want to just kind of understand where the department's coming from this, and the sponsor's reasoning around it. Just a little bit of context and history, please.
Thank you very much. And again, my apologies for not being as alert as I should have been and to be ready for the question. So this is actually codifying the practice that we put in place when we actually brought forth the multimodal policy. So basically what we're asking council to do is to provide us, again, codifying what we're already practicing. If someone is going to be requesting some part of the right-of-way to be closed for more than 7 days, we're going to require them to come in with a full-blown traffic control plan that is signed and sealed by an engineer. And then this way it allows us to have a conversation about, do you really need to do that for that much time? Can we leave? We want to maintain the pedestrian traffic. How are we going to get that done? Again, or we need to maintain bicycle and pedestrian traffic. How are we going to get that done? So in the past, we just kind of allowed and gave developers the opportunity to shut down the right-of-way. This is requiring a full-blown conversation. I do want to let y'all know at times we are going to have to shut down the right-of-way just because we're building up to the curb. There's some challenges a little bit to making sure we're keeping everyone safe, but it is the intent of our department to make sure that multimodal access is maintained during for all construction sites and through the tenure of the actual construction project going on.
So then just by way of follow-up, this is a bill from NDOT. This is an administration bill to effectuate some internal policy work.
Correct.
That you're doing. Does this get into the provision of sidewalk coverage?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and where in this is that addressed specifically?
So that would be part of their traffic control plan. So when they come in, so one of the things we hear very much from a developer is, I have to close the sidewalk because it's not safe. So when they throw that to us, we say, you're going to be required then to put up a scaffolding to provide safety to the pedestrian. So as part of the conversation we have based on what it is the developer is telling us is the issue and the problems, again, safety is what's driving all of the conversation. Not every time a scaffold needs to be put up, but if they're claiming that there's potential fall down from the building on the facade or stuff, we're going to require them to put up the actual scaffolding to protect the pedestrian and bicycle activity.
Okay, I appreciate that. Chair, I really appreciate this bill being brought. I appreciate the work that NDOT is doing, appreciate the sponsors. I would be interested perhaps in a one meeting deferral with a re-referral just to refine this somewhat. Again, very much supportive, just thinking we might be able to refine a little bit. Thank you.
Is that a motion?
I think maybe.
Are you asking the sponsors to?
I'm asking the sponsors to please consider. I don't want to.
Councilmember Cash, you're the lead sponsor on this bill. We're on item number 3, and Councilmember Henderson just asked for a one meeting deferral with a re-referral back to commission. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks. I came in the middle of Councilmember Henderson's remarks. I'm sorry for being a little late. I guess I think I'm open to that, but I guess if I could understand the concern a little bit better. Sorry, I'm asking you to repeat something.
Oh, no, that's fine. And I know Council Lady Allen has some questions. I don't know, Chair, maybe if you just come back to me at the end of the discussion, and then I'd be happy to just make my case for it after others have asked questions. Thank you.
We'll listen to questions if you want to, and then we'll come back to you if you're interested in entertaining the deferral. Councilmember Cash.
Thank you.
Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had a good back and forth because in 2016, this body passed what was called the Worksite Construction Safety Act that required safe accommodation, and I think we did start to see the first scaffolds over sidewalks begin to happen, because up till then it was the wild, wild west. But at that time, the bill that we passed was fairly non-specific and simply referred to, I think, Public Works policy.
Correct.
But it did require a traffic plan after 20 days, as you and I had back and forth about. I don't know that it required one stamped by a professional engineer. So can you just explain a little bit about how this ups the game beyond just extending it from 7 to 20 days? And hopefully y'all have been doing that for things longer than 20 days.
Mike wants to talk? Yes, thank you, Councilmember Allen. This actually does up the game quite significantly. We've, instead of it being 20 days, we're reducing it to 7 days. If they need to do a closure and it's 7 days, we don't necessarily require a sign and seal, but if they are going to be closed for more than 7 days, they are actually, no?
It's 7 or more days.
7 or more days, excuse me. 7 or more days. Thank you, Brad. So 7 or more days, they are going to have to provide us with a sealed engineering traffic control that's going to explain what right away they want to close, why they want to close it, what all the safety practices are going to put in place, and then that allows us to have the conversation, making sure that they are maintaining access for as many modes as possible.
And that, I know there was some standard with an alphabet soup of MUTCD or something that
Correct.
they had to go by. So we're referring to that just in terms of providing safe accommodation and having the signs at a crosswalk as opposed to mid-block when you can't get away from the mess that you just walked into. So all that stuff will be
Yes.
by referring to those standards. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Any other questions before we go back to Councilmember Cash? Seeing none, Councilmember Cash, floor is yours.
Thanks. I have a question. I don't know if the director mentioned this, but there will be, you're setting up a committee to kind of review the exceptions. Did you speak about that?
No, I did not, sir.
So it's like around third.
Yeah, I'm going to
I know Mr. Freeze, I had a meeting with him about it.
I'm going to let him speak to that because he's actually been the one who's been spearheading that initiative.
So yes, Councilmember, we are setting up an inception committee to review and provide more expertise to the department as far as the ways and means of building. In there, it will not supplant the director's authority to approve or deny that, but we do need some additional level of expertise when it comes to the ways and means of a site plan and building that. We may never have always on staff that level of expertise that we're going to get from the industry to do so. So it's important to point out that our first answer is going to be no. They have to go through an exception process if it's 7 or more days in there. And then through that process, they are required to submit a stamped and sealed traffic control plan, as well as other items that they actually have to provide justifying why they should be granted an exception. So the exception review committee will review those in specifically the larger scale projects where we really need some more level of expertise for those, making that determination.
Right, and the committee won't be dominated by any one group or industry, but there'll be expertise, so they can kind of give that field's point of view about things.
That's correct. That's correct. We're going to have an 11-member committee. Each major metro department who is relative to this actually has a seat on that committee. Metro Nashville PD, Water Services, WEGO. In addition to that, other advocacy like Walk Back Nashville has a seat on that committee, as well as site plan engineer who is seasoned in actually understanding the ways and means of building, but also a developer representative will be on that committee as well. So we'll have a well-rounded committee to provide that level of expertise to the department.
Thanks, I appreciate all that work. And to Councilmember Allen's referring to earlier work, I know that there was a bill that went through in 2016 and that did some of this work. I think some of the things in this bill are more specific and more shorter, or a shorter length of time before they have to apply for an exception. And I know the mayor's office has worked hard on this, and NDOT has already set kind of a policy in place or a pilot policy in place. And Walk Back Nashville has been integral, kind of had the initial groundswell of support for doing something that we can do better on these things, both shutting down for construction and large event stuff. And I know Mr. Jameson has some institutional memory about the difference between the earlier legislation and what we're proposing with this bill. If you could speak to that, Mr. Jameson. And it may have been covered, but
as I recall, Councilor Allen did the work and co-sponsor Councilman Elrod in 2016. In BL 2016, sorry, can't hear me. Councilor Allen was the lead sponsor. As I recall, that legislation did primarily two things. It asked the then Public Works Director, implement some rules and guidelines, and then have a traffic site plan requirement. This includes and maintains the traffic site plan requirement, but does codify several more specifics that tighten it up.
Oh, that's where she's getting the 20 days, because it's from.
Thanks. And did Councilmember Henderson want to?
Councilmember Henderson?
Yeah, I guess
You're
I
recognized.
have some follow-up questions about the fees and why we are codifying those specifically, and then as well if we have maybe attached to this legislation or our internal policy that this is supporting. So what I hear is kind of, prospectively the intent or kind of, pilot working it out now, internal committee, but then we are really getting specific about, $55 a day, $10 for this, $20 for that. And I don't really know if that's best practice for us to be codifying that, and how do we arrive at these fees, please?
So the ordinance in Section 4 that addresses the fees, just to take a step back, I know you know this, Councilmember Henderson, but under state law, we have to be able to establish that our fees are covering the administrative expense of administering the service. So for your average obstruction or excavation, there's not a huge expense to NDOT. There's acknowledging it, getting the permit, but actually going out and doing the excavation, there's nothing like that on their part. So the current fees amount are essentially maintained, but they are tracked to the new time permits. So in other words, the $55 that applied previously to the less than, now it's applying to the 1 to 6 days, less than 7 days. If you're in a high impact area, at $100, again, with respect to the 7 days. If you're exceeding or 7 or more days, that's the $10 per day or $20 per day in the high impact area. If we adjust the actual amount of the fees, that requires the fee study per state law. So we're mostly in this legislation sticking to what's been on the books, but applying it to the new time frame.
So, Mr. Jameson, I guess my question would be, do you anticipate doing a fee study? Because in my experience, the monitoring of these closures for construction, whether in the high impact zone or not, has been insufficient. And so whether from support staff or just, the work that's needed, because on active construction sites, somebody might agree upon a plan with the committee and sign off on that. But where the rubber meets the road is every single day as things go in and out of the site and, concrete little bollards get moved and set off into the bike lane. It really requires almost constant daily inspection to keep all those multimodal pathways appropriately open. And so I guess I'm a little feeling like Councilman Cash and colleagues, good work. Glad it's in progress. When's the fee study coming? Why are we kind of recodifying fees that are so obviously already too low? If this is in progress as a pilot, why are we moving to codify this now? Again, not that I don't support codifying it and improving it in some way. I just feel like, again, so much of this stuff in this NDOT space, whether it's sidewalk vending stuff that we're doing or the smart parking or this bill, just the devil is in the details. And so, that's, I guess, why I'm asking Councilman Cash for that 1 meeting deferral, not because I don't support this. I want this to be as strong and successful as it could possibly be. No, and I just have some lingering concerns.
No, that's a great question. I'm going to take a stab at 2 answers, and then I might ask if Director Alarcon could weigh in. So cyclically, most fee structures, administrations ask for sort of a recurring assessment of where we're at on a cyclical basis. So I could assure you that eventually there would be this fee structure assessment here. Here the issue is you're going to want to have some structure in place so that when NDOT is asked, what does this actually cost you to implement, they have some track record, some period of, I would suggest, at least a few months, so they can say, now with these heightened restrictions, now with these tightened guidelines, here's what it's looking like for us on a day-to-day basis for administration, and here are our respective costs. And at that point, perhaps elevate or suggest to the council elevation of those fees or something else. But let me, if I can turn to Director Alarcon.
Thank you very much. We actually do have plans to kick off a fee study. We've been working with finance. They had just are finalizing the procurement process, bringing on a consultant that will do the study for us. We're looking and hoping that we can kick that off in January. A fee study typically takes about 8 to 10 months to get done, so we're a year down the road. And we really would like to codify these initiatives so that it helps us to move forward in a better direction of saying, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, and this is why we're doing it. I think it's really important. I just want to highlight and go back to, because we do specify in this that we're following the MUTCD, and I think that's what's really going to help us understand when we're having the conversation with the developer or the construction company about why they need this safety mechanism or that safety mechanism. So where we didn't get into specific guidelines and processes, the MUTCD will really strongly guide that. And there's some pretty stringent practices and criteria that are established around that. And we felt that that would be a really good guiding principle for us to follow, and as well as for everyone to be following when it comes to appropriate use of the roadway.
Councilmember Cash.
Thank you. I appreciate all the good input and dialogue. I'd like to move for a one-meeting deferral.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the deferral? All right, and seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And does that deferral motion come with a re-referral back to transportation infrastructure? Councilman Cash?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a deferral. What's that? Okay, all right. Any opposed to that? All right, I believe we've already voted on it, so the one meeting deferral is approved. Now we'll move on to the next bill, Bill 2022-1532. Bradford is a sponsor, extends the boundaries of the urban services district within the jurisdiction of the Metropolitan government to include certain properties located in the Council District 13 and approving the plan of services. Councilmember Bradford.
Thank you, Chair. Move approval.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Councilman Bradford, I wonder if you could just contextualize this for us. I really, colleagues, since we base so much of our policy, especially on the NDOT side, whether it's GSD, USD, UZO, et cetera, I'm just always interested to see when we expand our USD. I think it's often really good to see. And so I just wanted to kind of understand that, Councilman Bradford, just briefly, and then as well take this as an opportunity to ask the administration when and where is the USD GSD study, please. And Councilman Bradford, if you, I guess, go first, please, and then maybe Mr. Jamison can follow up.
So this came up with, around the end of last year, first of this year, a couple of constituents who live in this cul-de-sac have reached out to me wanting to know why residents on the street that heads, it's Ortega Drive, right off of the interstate. Well, Ortega Drive is in the USD. So they get all the city services. But for some reason, when the lines were drawn the last time that area was added, the cul-de-sac at the end of the street was not included. So you've got city contracted trucks providing services up and down the street, turning around, using the cul-de-sac to turn around to hit the other side of the street, but not servicing the cul-de-sac. So, we found out that somehow it's pretty much 12 properties and 6 parcels divided into duplexes, so 12 total, that somehow just fell through the cracks. We met with some of the residents and had NDOT and all the stakeholders, and it was pretty much decided it wouldn't be an issue to add these parcels since, A, there's already a truck that comes down that road and kind of already hits that area, so it wouldn't be adding a new route, it wouldn't be adding that much. There's already a city maintenance street light right at the end where the street and the cul-de-sac start, so they didn't see any need to put any extra lighting. And so even though with the annexations there is that kind of pretext of you have to wait a year, most of the metro departments I've talked with said pretty much they could probably start immediately because the only thing they'd have to add is they'd have to give everybody new recycling or trash. So, it's not a large area that's being annexed. It's just a drop in the bucket, but it's one of those, how did we get here, and let's try to fix it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think, Chair, I think we all have some of these funny little things, like how did this get left out and why is this way? Councilmember Bradford, is this a street adopted for public maintenance? Is there an HOA? I have seen over my term a really kind of higgledy-piggledy mess, frankly, around which HOAs have streets adopted for public maintenance, which don't. What's the rationale for it? Where are they? Why are they? Is this an HOA? So it's a street that Metro paves and does everything else onto.
Yeah, from my understanding, Ortega Drive, there's on both sides, you're probably got a dozen more houses, 6 on 6, that get trash service, have the street lights, have, our Metro streets. But for some reason, the cul-de-sac at the end of the street was not included when
Got it.
when everything was drawn.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Jameson, then, on the study, please.
The Finance Department has been working on this, as you know, for several months. They've been working with a consultant. I believe the consultant's initial meeting with Finance is on November 30th, and they'll have a very specific outlay date after that, I anticipate.
And then, Mr. Jameson, as far as the scope of that work, has that already been established based on previous discussions with council members and coming out of the budget process and so forth?
I believe so.
Can that scope be shared with us?
Sure, absolutely. If you're asking if they can expand it to add the 12 parcels, maybe.
No, no.
Yeah, the scope can absolutely be shared.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Any other discussion on the bill? There's a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We recommend approval. Next on the agenda is BL 2022-1533, Rosenberg and others sponsors. Approves an easement on certain property located at 7034 Charlotte Pike, owned by Lowe's Home Centers, LLC. Do I have a motion for approval? Councilmember Bradford?
At the behest of the sponsor last night in planning, I will move for a one-meeting deferral.
Moved and probably seconded. The discussion on the deferral. Seeing none, all in favor of a one-meeting deferral? Any opposed? We recommend a one-meeting deferral. Now we move to BL 2022-1535, Roten and other sponsors, authorizes the Director of Public Property to transfer to the state of Tennessee any remaining fee interest the Metropolitan government may have in a portion of the right-of-way of Broadway Avenue in front of Union Station. Do I have a motion? Moved, probably seconded. I believe there's an amendment. Councilmember Allen.
I don't have the amendment. I have a question. Should I wait for the amendment?
Okay, no, you can.
So I apologize for being late to the meeting where I could have learned a whole lot about the bridge, and I don't know if this is related to the bridge, but if it is, I'd like to take the opportunity to ask a question since I didn't.
Fire away.
Okay, so my question is, a bridge that was built in 1948, I'm guessing is historical. Has this been run past has the bridge been run past the Historic Commission?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Director Alarcon is saying.
Director Alarcon? Yes.
I mean, in talking with Tim Walker, he did not seem to be aware of it, and maybe we're talking about two different things, but I'm just wondering if we can get more information on the Historic Commission's. I mean, my understanding is if it's federally funded, there's supposed to be just a historic conversation about that. If we could get information on that before, if there's other legislation coming up, I'll wait, but if this is our only chance to ask questions and find out about things, then I would like to ask for that.
Councilmember Conley, you have a comment about that? Okay. All right. Director Alarcon, you want to respond to that?
Good evening. This did go and was reviewed by the Historical Committee. This is actually funded by the state, not through federal.
Okay.
And it has to go through their historical review as well because it's Highway 1. So, but we'll get you all the information and share that out as to when it went through the different review process. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay.
I apologize.
If we can have that before third reading, that'd be great.
I will definitely have it to you before third reading.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for missing the 3:30 meeting. I had another meeting I could not reschedule. But I think to Councilmember Allen's point, as we have an item here that is relevant to the bridge, I'll just go on record as saying, to me, as a joint city and state project, particularly considering that there is potential federal funding available for this, we're missing a generational opportunity, and we're putting back a plain Jane bridge with no additional facilities or consideration for how much pedestrian activity there is, with a turn lane to nowhere, that frankly should be a gateway to a vibrant new downtown. In fact, it should be a bridge connecting to renewed and reinvigorated sections of downtown and midtown. And I hate to see us missing this opportunity. And I know it's a state-led project and we don't have a lot of say in it, but boy, I wish we pushed a lot harder on it.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments on the bill? There's a proposed amendment. Would somebody like to move the amendment? It's administrative in nature. Moved, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? All in favor? Any opposed? The amendment passes. Now, any more discussion on the bill as amended? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, we recommend approval of the bill as amended. And now, Councilmember Sledge, I appreciate you hanging in there for us. We will move to item number 14 on the agenda, substitute BL 2022-1412, Sledge and others sponsors, amends the Metropolitan Code relative to parking minimums. If a member of the committee would get the bill on so we can discuss it. Moved and properly seconded. I will come to you, Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Chair. There's a second substitute I would ask that the committee move, and I'll give a brief explanation.
The second substitute is moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Sledge, back to you.
Thank you. This second substitute adds in neighborhood landmark overlays into the section of the bill in which minimums would be applied, parking minimums would be applied. That's for new neighborhood landmark overlays. That came as a result in response to having a sit down with members of the Edgefield community, many of whom came to speak at public hearing. So we had a good discussion on that, and that's what came out of that, because I know that they had that on their minds. There's another piece of this that we talked about that I think most folks will want to know about, but it's part of the full bill, so I'll wait till then. And we just ask for your support on the second substitute first.
Any discussion on the second substitute? Councilmember Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a constituent who serves on the BZA and is an architect that I know has been having conversations with the sponsor of the bill. His concern was about kind of some of the institutional enterprises within any of these districts, a hospital, a church, some other place that might need more parking that's not necessarily ready access to transit and whatnot. And I just wondered if the sponsor had considered that and had any response to that.
Councilmember Sledge?
Yes, and thank you, Councilmember Nash. In fact, myself and Ms. Milligan replied to your constituent about those uses. I'll try and do the best I can and turn to Ms. Milligan when I inevitably miss something. On educational uses, MMPS actually can kind of do whatever it wants regarding state law, although they do bring designs before Metro, so there's a collaborative process there. My understanding is on the institutional and the medical uses that there's flexibility there, and that's where I would ask Ms. Milligan maybe to weigh in.
Ms. Milligan, the floor is yours.
Sure. So there are some uses within the code that don't have a set number of parking spaces that is established per square footage or seat, and those are essentially left to the discretion of the traffic engineer through typically a parking study that would come up with the demand. So there are some uses that sort of fall under that, so they would not have a set maximum per se, but it would be through a parking study to determine what the demand would be, and then that would establish the maximum. All of the uses in the code really vary based on parking. And those numbers were created over many years, and some through amendments based on sort of industry standards when we look at parking demand for certain uses. And then there's also the option of a variance if, through the BZA, if a use needs more parking, if they determine that they need more parking than what the maximum would be. And it's not you can go to the BZA now now to ask for a reduction in parking with a parking study that indicates that you need less parking, it would be the same process, just sort of reversed, where you could go to the BZA with a study indicating that you need additional parking and then ask for a variance on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Nash?
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the second substitute? Councilmember Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think going back to the question before, one of the questions in the email that I want to make sure we address is that there was concern that an actual hardship is not does not exist. But I guess I want it to be said that yes, that does qualify to get relief from the BZA. And I'm looking at Ms. Milligan because she was the one talking about the BZA, though I'm talking about hardship, which might be more of a legal term. So I will throw it to y'all.
So what the code right now outlines is that with a parking study to indicate that you need less parking, you can go to the BZA and ask for a variance, with that being the basis. So that would sort of be your foundation for the request to the BZA. So the inverse would be true. If you had a parking study that indicated that you needed more, then that could be the basis for a BZA review.
Councilmember Young. Any other questions relative to the second substitute? Seeing none, Councilmember Cash?
Yeah, I think a lot of good work has gone into this bill, and I see and share many of the goals that we're trying to reach with this bill. I know, things that come to mind as positives in a lot of the feedback that we've been getting, more affordable housing or more housing, more flexible design. The two of the specific things that I appreciated and really spoke to me were that small local businesses that want to get going and succeed, this could help them, a small retail business that doesn't need to require parking. The email that I got that spoke to me the most was about childcare centers and, making sure that there's enough, it's not a battle between parking spaces and playground space. However, some of the feedback that we've gotten has concerned me, and I guess there are questions. And I think a lot of it relates to, we do have a lot of different uses and a lot of different standards for what, as I think has just been mentioned, different standards for different uses. We talked about institutional. I know one concern that's come up several times is like restaurants that are close to residential properties. And so while I think this bill has a lot of good things in it, I'm not to the point where I'm ready to support it and would.
Talking about the bill or the second substitute?
I'm sorry, both.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Is that it?
So I'm not ready to support it.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the second substitute? Seeing none, we're going to vote on the second substitute now. All in favor? Any opposed? I see none. All right. Are you a no vote on the second substitute, Councilmember Cash?
I'm not.
No vote?
I approve of the second substitute.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right. So the second substitute passes. Councilmember Sledge, we now are on the bill with the second substitute, and it looks like there's another substitute on there, and talk about that.
I won't be offering it. This was a second substitute brought forward by another member to exempt their district.
Well, back to you on the bill as substituted for the second time.
Thank you. So I would ask for the committee's approval, and I'll give just very brief. I'll try to give an update from yesterday, so I'm not going over the same material we did in planning. But interestingly, last night I had the opportunity to listen in on a conversation exactly like this about parking minimums somewhere where minimums were much more stringent than ours. In other words, much more parking was provided required to be provided. And the conversation centered around the lack of foot traffic for small businesses, particularly restaurants and bars, the fear that people were driving through this area and not stopping in, and the fact that even though they had so much parking, because of their land values, they were unable to expand their businesses or create new businesses because they knew that they would have to create much more parking that they wouldn't be able to monetize on such expensive land. That place was Berry Hill. And Berry Hill commissioners last night were discussing this exact same conversation that we're having. Their parking minimums are 5 times higher than ours are. They require 1 space per 100 square feet of non-residential use. And the conversation that they were having, now they haven't come to a consensus yet, but the conversation they were having is, how do we become a place that encourages the places we need, namely small businesses, to create the revenue we need to serve our residents and to serve our business owners. So I want you to, the committee to know, and for the larger council to know tonight, that these conversations are happening elsewhere in the county as well. And the conversations are becoming about, we've got to do something different. Now, I do understand the concerns. I have tried to get back to everybody I can and hold meetings where I can too. I do think we're at a point where we can do something that, to Ms. Milligan's point, kind of changes the standard to where we think about what are the exceptions when we need more instead of the exceptions of when we need less. We'll talk at length tonight, I'm sure, on the floor about different portions of this, but I did want to give that sort of new experience that I had last night because it was a fascinating conversation to be part of and ask for the committee's approval.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. I want to give an update. During the Planning Committee meeting yesterday, I'd asked a question about the permit process, and it was suggested that we hold that discussion for today, and actually I've received some more information since then. I guess my concerns in asking the question about the permit process was that, first, has that process been communicated to these communities that would be impacted by the parking minimums? I definitely see the benefit for small businesses in the parking minimums and developers in the parking minimum, just trying to get a better understanding of the benefit for residents and neighborhoods that will be impacted by the parking minimums, because those businesses that will have less parking will mean that individuals that don't use public transportation, or if the transportation isn't sustainable for them to use it to get to where they're going to be parking in neighborhoods, which is what's going on now. I'd ask for information about that process. It does cost, if there is a $10 annual fee to get the permit for parking for an individual at their property, as well as if a street was interested in having a parking permit process to ensure that those who live on that street will have parking, sustainable parking on the street. Of course, there's a petition process to get it on the street. The council member has to be involved. So there is a process that is annual. It is an annual process. And in looking at how many districts have parking permits in place already, District 18, Councilmember Cash's district, had the most of any of the urban zoning districts around. So it's interesting to me that he still has some reservations about this bill, considering that his district has the most parking permits, and they're all over the spectrum. Some of the permits are for 1 hour minimum, 2 hour minimum. Some are 24/7. So I guess I'm getting to my question, Chair. My question is, and I'm happy Director Alarcon is here, and maybe NDOT can speak to, is there within this bill discussions or consideration for better organizing the permit process, parking permit process as a whole, to make it more consistent and more uniform, to get more information out about it? For example, in District 21, Councilman Taylor's district, there are only 3 parking permits for that district compared to like 20-something for District 18, for example. So that suggests to me that because we are hearing about residents in District 21, particularly along Buchanan, that have issues with parking because of bars and other restaurants on that street, that suggests to me that either they don't know about this parking process or permit process, or there are barriers or issues as to why they're not applying for the permits. So I guess if Director Alarcon or someone from NDOT can speak about the parking permit process as a whole, getting it more organized, more uniform. Are there considerations for that? And also plans for making the permit process more available, or educating the community more about it? Thank you.
Thank you for that brief question. Director Alarcon, could you speak to this? I think you understand the gist of what she's saying is basically she's concerned that people don't really understand the process and wants it to be better organized. Is that fashion? Is that right?
Yes, we do have plans on improving the overall process for residential parking permit program, including the enforcement side of it. So once again, council members, thank y'all very much for your support of the smart parking program, because one of the things that is missing is the lack of enforcement. With the smart parking program, we will be adding 8 additional new staff members to help us with the enforcement of the current residential parking programs that we have, and we have not necessarily done a great job with maintaining them and enforcing them. So next month, we're actually going to start stepping out and visiting with all of those neighborhoods that currently have a residential parking permit program, talk to them about their program, what's working, not's working, and then actually look at if we need to make improvements or adjustments, and then run that back through the council members to make sure we're moving in the right direction. So beginning of January, when we start enforcement, nobody is surprised. On top of that, we are adding to our we're going through a process right now of where we're moving to a new platform for permits, and that's for all permits within our department. So it's for your right-of-way permits, it's for your lane closures, it's for your special events, it's for every single permit, including your residential parking permit program. And we'll better define what that needs to look and feel like. There'll be a way to actually have people go online. There'll be a process to follow that'll be well spelled out. It's going to be through license plate recognition, so the residents will actually be registering their license, and that's how we'll be identifying that they're a part of the residential parking permit program. In some neighborhoods, I've always received the question, well, what about if I have an event going on? We're going to work on a process for that as well. So we're going to be talking about all of that, but we haven't really done a great job in the past of managing it, so we're going to I don't want to say start over, because there is a plan in place, but we're going to revisit with all the different residential neighborhoods now, and find out what's working, what's not, and then come together with what program they need, and then we'll actually move it forward with the council members. One thing I do want to say about the residential parking permit program, it does vary by neighborhood. So there will be a set standard than which they will apply for, but I do want to say there will probably at sometimes need to be adjustments based on what's happening in that particular neighborhood. One neighborhood may need 24/7, another neighborhood may only need from 8 to 6. It's just going to vary based on what the issues and the problems are, but with the technology we'll be getting through the smart parking, we'll be able to collect that data, have that as part of the conversation, that I think will actually kind of help us do a better job for our community as a whole. So that's my long-winded answer as well. Thank you for the chance.
Did it get to your answer?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Cash.
Thank you. Since my district was brought up in the council members' comments, I'd like to talk about my experience. And as Director Alarcon knows, this is like from my first meeting with her. Parking enforcement is something that I've talked about a lot. I came into this job first, in my district, we have like 3 really large institutions, 2 universities and medical center that used to be a part of one of those universities. And a lot of the residential permit parking, I think, is to, and Vanderbilt charges their employees to park, and some of them pay that fee, and some of them do not, and those that do not find other places to park for free. And the enforcement has not been there. I was going to say, I came into this job thinking, man, I really need to go after Vanderbilt. And get them to change their ways, and have come to the conclusion, especially with Director Alarcon and her, I think she has some great qualifications related to this area, that I would have much more control over what we as a government do about it than what I can get a large institution to do about it. I do think in places in my district, people have given up. They either don't get their permits because there's no enforcement, or they have been told by somebody that there's not enough enforcement, and they say, what's the point in the residential permit parking if, it doesn't work? I have, as I did mention earlier, have some reservations, and I'm not ready to vote yes on the bill. I do believe that if this, what we passed last meeting, is as effective as I think it's going to be, the parking enforcement law will remove more cars from places they're not supposed to be than this bill. The bill before us today will add to the parking, if that makes sense. So I've come to a conclusion that I feel pretty good about it, but caveat, we haven't seen it yet. We've heard promises for a while, and the specifics feel really good to me, but nonetheless, it's Metro enforcement. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm hopeful, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you. Just kind of following on that theme, as the former district council member for District 18, I put some of those into place. And I know that the issue frequently is we're trying to encourage people to keep their cars off the road. But if they can just go into the neighborhood and park for free in the neighborhood, we haven't solved that problem there. We've just put it on the backs of the neighbors. And so I feel an obligation to provide some really strong assurance to those neighbors. And I'm very, very encouraged by what we have the potential to do. I would feel better about it if there were some way to tie these two together and say, when A happens and we reduce parking minimums in a commercial area next to residential area, we automatically kick in, and the city provides really good support for those neighbors. And yes, people can still park on those streets, but they have to, if you're a commercial visitor, then you're going to pay to park on the streets nearby or something, and the technology is there to do that. So I would renew my request for a 2-meeting deferral to give us time to think of some smart language that can maybe make some direct connections that are codified so that we can truly assure our neighbors that, yes, we are dealing with the parking problem, because otherwise they're just going to resist any changes to add density on the corridors, and we're going to defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do, because we have to add density on the corridors to get the transit, and we have to get the transit to make it so that people will ride the bus as opposed to driving. So I really appreciate all the work that the sponsor has done, and the fact that he learned about a good amendment to make by meeting with that neighborhood. I think my neighborhoods have similar amendments. I'm not going to support trying to obstruct this bill, but I do think there is more work that can be done to make the neighborhoods that we're hearing from more comfortable with it. And I would just strongly request a 2-meeting deferral, and then maybe we've got the language built into it that specifically refers to the residential permit parking, so that the neighborhoods know that we're not just ignoring them, and we're not being, I think, overly optimistic that if we say you don't have to park, then all of a sudden people will stop driving, because they won't park in the neighborhood. So I think they need to be tied more closely together, and I wasn't smart enough to figure that language out in the time that I've been thinking about it, but I do think that with the right people at the table in the next week or two, we can get there. So I would move for a 2-meeting deferral.
Do I hear a second?
Oh.
All right, moved and properly seconded. We are now on a 2-meeting deferral. Councilmember Henderson?
Thank you, Chair. I want to speak very strongly against a 2-meeting deferral, colleagues. I hear and appreciate the concern in neighborhoods, and I think Councilmember Cash, you, Council Lady Allen, Councilman Withers, other colleagues among us are very keenly aware of those kind of liminal areas where you have a major institution, you have a particular business. We're closely in touch with our constituents. We know those areas. Again, colleagues just within the UZO that have these issues. But we as a body have done a lot of good work in Title 17, and we have lagged somewhat in bringing some of our NDOT and parking improvements on. But parking is such a big piece of the land use puzzle for what we are trying to achieve as a city. And I think with smart parking passed as lead sponsor on smart parking, my engagement with Director Alarcon, understanding what the digital tools that are available to us to optimize our residential permit parking and get this right. We can't keep waiting as a city to get everything, just right. And this is going to affect construction, development, things that are in progress. And so what I want constituents and colleagues to understand is this is not just like we're going to flip some switch and now businesses aren't going to have parking anymore. This is looking forward is what this legislation is doing. So we absolutely have to come behind and do better at things we have not historically done. And we've done that by passing smart parking. To your point, implementation is everything. But, I just personally want to commit, honestly, if you've got neighborhood meetings where you feel like you're going to get called on the carpet about this, I will come to your neighborhood meeting. I really will talk about this more broadly in the context of what we're trying to achieve, both practically with the smart parking program and with land use. This is important to do at this juncture. I can remember when I was working on the sidewalk legislation and driving around town and seeing all these buildings going up, and it's like, we cannot get this passed soon enough, right? And just feeling that feeling of like when something got through approval and it didn't trigger the sidewalk regs. We're there, colleagues, with parking. We have an affordability crisis. Parking 100% induces demand. The more parking you have, the more driving and traffic you have. And so this is just flipping the script somewhat. The minimums become maximums. The burden for a variance is on folks who want to build more, not on folks who want to build less. This is not saying nobody has to have parking anymore. And for that reason, I feel like so many of the pieces are coming together. This is not a piece we should hold back on. So I would encourage you, please do not support a deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate the discussion of the committee. I would ask that the committee not the first two meetings, and I don't want to repeat what Councilmember Henderson so eloquently said. I do want to bring up a couple of quick points. I think we do have the order right. I mean, we did parking modernization last meeting. Director Alarcon has said we're going to start seeing the results of that in January. We're going to start seeing the enforcement. We're going to start seeing the extra staffing. We're going to start seeing the new programming. And colleagues, you will remember that we passed a version of this where we said properties with the majority frontage on corridors would not have parking minimums. That's been nearly 3 years. That was February of 2020 when we did that. It takes some time for these things to occur. And so I don't think you're going to see an immediate spark or reaction or response from the market when we're to pass it tonight. I actually think it's important to get the foundation for that, and then we're able to go forward and make the adjustments. And I'll say the same thing. When we need to make adjustments, we can make adjustments, but we have to get the foundation first so we know what, if any, adjustments need to be made. And I will speak the personal experience on two quick things. One, on residential permit parking. I have had several requests on residential permit parking from constituents. Every time I make sure I get them the petition link, tell them I'll support them if they want to get it done, let them know what the process is, where they got to go, everything. I think I've had one street in 7 years. In an urban neighborhood, an urban district, I've had one street that went through with the petition process. So some folks, when it comes to it, they decide, look, I'll make do with what I got. I don't want to go through this process for whatever reason. And so I hesitate to tie those two things together when that desire may not be uniform across the board. One last thing I will say that could potentially have a solid effect going out of the gate is that there are small contractors and small business owners right now, and I took a call from a couple today where a couple meaning a partnership where they were trying to find 3 parking spaces for a development because they can't hit the minimums. They're trying to figure out where they're going to stick 3 parking spaces. And these are things that people are spending time and money over to try to figure out how to build housing, how to build small commercial in our neighborhoods and in our communities. Like, to me, I think we've just created these hurdles that are, we need to be thoughtful about it, but we have some unnecessary hurdles. And the key I would ask the committee to consider on this is providing that flexibility that we just currently don't have. So with that, I would ask that you vote against the 2-meeting deferral. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Sledge. Any other discussion on the 2-meeting deferral? Seeing none, all in favor of a 2-meeting deferral, say aye. All opposed? Let's go with a show of hands. All in favor, show your hands. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed? 1, 2. Okay. The motion for 2-meeting deferral passes on the bill as substituted for the second time. All right. Thank you very much. This concludes the meeting of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee.